Updated COVID vaccines cleared for the coming season give health systems a fresh tool to protect millions as respiratory illness patterns shift. This is Omni View, episode 157. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved revised COVID-19 vaccines formulated for the 2026 to 2027 season. The decision follows the agency's review of current circulating variants and manufacturer data on the updated shots. Distribution is expected to begin ahead of the fall and winter period. Reuters reported the approval as a routine seasonal update that aligns vaccine composition with the strains health officials are tracking. Public health agencies view the step as maintaining continuity in a program that has already reached hundreds of millions of people since 2020. Some medical groups have noted that uptake in recent seasons has been lower than earlier years, which they link to shifting public perception of risk. The FDA's process requires manufacturers to demonstrate that the reformulated shots meet safety and effectiveness standards before authorization. Regulators weigh laboratory evidence on how well the new formulation matches dominant variants against the practical timetable needed to produce and ship doses in large quantities. This timing means the chosen strains reflect data gathered several months earlier, rather than the most recent daily reports. Health agencies in other countries often coordinate similar updates through shared surveillance networks, though each national regulator issues its own authorization. Shifting now to developments in the Middle East. A senior Iranian security official stated that Tehran has set specific conditions for allowing full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to shipping. The remarks come amid ongoing regional tensions that have already disrupted tanker traffic. Officials framed the conditions as tied to broader security and economic concerns. Reuters quoted the official describing the strait as a leverage point similar to routes controlled by other nations. Iranian statements emphasize national sovereignty over the waterway and link passage rights to sanctions relief. Shipping analysts and neighboring governments have tracked how any prolonged closure raises global energy costs and forces rerouting around Africa. The factual baseline is that the strait handles roughly 1/5 of global oil trade, a figure both sides reference when discussing potential disruption. Neighboring states and major importers treat any change in access rules as a signal that could affect insurance rates and delivery schedules for months ahead. Iranian officials present the conditions as a response to external pressure, while other governments describe them as additional obstacles to normal commercial movement. Meanwhile, Iran's top security official denied media reports alleging a plot targeting one of President Trump's sons. The statement was issued directly in response to the claims circulating in some outlets. No additional evidence was presented in the denial. Reuters carried the official rejection as part of Iran's effort to counter narratives that could escalate bilateral friction. U.S. officials have not confirmed or detailed any specific threat in public statements tied to this report. The episode sits within a longer pattern of accusations and counter-accusations between Washington and Tehran that both governments use to shape domestic and international opinion. Each side frames the other's statements as attempts to influence third-party perceptions rather than direct responses to verified events. The absence of public corroboration from either capital leaves the original report's sourcing as the main point of contention in coverage. In other news, convicted Bosnian Serb war criminal Ratko Mladić has died in prison aged 84. A senior UN official says. The death occurred while Mladić was serving a life sentence handed down by an international tribunal. No further details on cause or immediate institutional response were included in the initial announcement. BBC reported the death through a senior UN official, placing it in the context of completed international prosecutions for crimes committed during the 1990s conflicts in the former Yugoslavia. Tribunals established by the United Nations documented specific events and issued judgments that remain reference points for courts and historians examining those years. Family members and victim groups have followed developments in such cases for decades, often citing the need for documented records over any single individual's fate. The announcement adds a factual endpoint to one high-profile case without altering the underlying archive of evidence already entered in the tribunal proceedings. Turning to markets, the Nasdaq index closed ahead of other major U.S. benchmarks after NVIDIA issued a stronger-than-expected revenue forecast tied to artificial intelligence demand. Technology shares rose on the news while broader market sectors showed more modest movement. Investors treated the update as confirmation that AI-related spending remains robust. Reuters noted that the forecast reinforced expectations of continued growth in data center hardware. Market participants focused on how sustained AI investment could support valuations in a narrow group of large technology firms. Some portfolio managers have pointed out that concentration in those names increases sensitivity to any single company's results. The performance gap between the Nasdaq and other indices illustrates how sector-specific drivers can dominate daily moves even when overall economic data are mixed. Traders compare the current pattern to earlier periods when one technology theme accounted for a large share of index gains, noting both the upside momentum and the narrower participation across the broader market. An analysis in The Economist reviewed popular assertions that dark chocolate improves blood pressure, mood, and cognitive function. The review found that many of these claims rest on small or short-term studies whose results have not been consistently replicated. Larger population data show more modest or inconsistent effects. The piece distinguishes between compounds such as flavanols that appear in laboratory settings and the amounts actually consumed in typical chocolate products. Nutrition researchers cited in the article note that processing and added sugar can reduce any potential benefit. Consumers encounter these claims mainly through marketing and short social media summaries rather than full study protocols. The gap between controlled experiments and everyday consumption patterns explains why headline benefits often fail to appear in broader health statistics. Now, to really understand this story, there's something most coverage leaves out. Most coverage of annual vaccine updates leaves the impression that scientists simply pick the latest variant and move on. In practice, the process begins months earlier when global surveillance networks sequence thousands of virus samples and feed the data into mathematical models that forecast which lineages are likely to dominate in the coming season. Committees at the World Health Organization and national regulators then weigh those projections against manufacturing lead times, because producing hundreds of millions of doses requires a fixed formulation decision well before peak illness season. The same sequence data also inform which older strains can be dropped without leaving large immunity gaps. Knowing this timeline shows why an approval announced in late August still reflects evidence gathered in the spring and early summer rather than last week's headlines. When reports emphasize a single new mutation, the relevant question is whether that mutation has already risen in the modeled forecasts used by the committees. Readers can check the next strength selection meeting summary published by the WHO to see which sequences actually drove the decision. The lead time also explains why regulators sometimes retain a strain even after newer variants appear, if models indicate the older one will still circulate widely. This structure keeps the update process anchored in accumulated surveillance rather than reactive daily shifts. If you want to go deeper on the vaccine update, compare how Reuters and regional health ministry statements describe the same approval criteria. Tomorrow, watch for any further statements from Iranian officials on access through the Strait of Hormuz. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best informed people read more than one perspective, and the calmest ones know that most days, somewhere, something is quietly getting better. For full source links, check out today's written briefing on the Omni View Summaries page. Share this with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NARA Network. Links in the show notes. One more thing, if you liked today's episode, our sister show, First Principles Daily, is worth a spot in your feed. Reasoning from raw materials, not analogy, on the breakthroughs that actually cut cost. It's one of the NARA Network's daily briefings, all free at naranetwork.com. The Do Positive Pod is the club for people who do something about it. Episodes and the dispatch wall at naranetwork.com, the DPPOD. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.